I'm always like, I want to turn $1 into $2.
Yeah.
Meaning I want to turn 50,000 into 100,000 or 100,000 into 200,000. And I don't want to do it in 10 years. I want to do it within the year. And at the time, this was our goal, right? People, real estate gurus were like, that's impossible. You're never going to do this. You're never, ever. That's not how it works. But we did. And we kept using these. And I'm not talking about manifestation. I'm talking about having a very clear goal and then using these universal laws and spiritual laws and then actually selecting properties out of this very specific strategy. So anyways, we realized, oh shit, we're onto something here. And we kept doing this again and again.
Hello, and welcome back to the Joyous Path to Millions podcast. This episode is going to be so good. It's going to be all of my favorite topics like women in business, entrepreneurship, wealth building, real estate investing, money mindset. So stick around. You are absolutely going to love this episode. In case you're new around here, I'm your host, Emily June Wilcox. I'm a serial entrepreneur, 7-figure business owner, mindset junkie, the creator of the Money Wound Medicine program. And it's my mission to put more money in the hands of heart-centered humans through healing money wounds, building abundant businesses, and passive income, wealth building, so that we can collectively up-level the frequency of the planet and usher in new paradigm wealth. I'm excited to be joined today by Shasta Townsend. She is the visionary behind the On-Demand Wealth Machine, a system for empowering individuals to attain their dream lifestyles by fast-tracking wealth accumulation with ease and efficiency. Hell yes, that sounds amazing. She has had a remarkable career spanning 2 decades, has touched the lives of countless individuals, guiding them towards realizing their aspirations. And then her expertise has garnered her recognition. She's been on prominent platforms such as HGTV, Medium, Huffington Post, Yahoo Finance, amongst others. She is, I don't know how to say this. I'm so sorry. Your
Cremate.
cremate. There we go. A proud cremate Canadian and resides in the picturesque Riviera Nayarit, Mexico, relishing in the joys of life alongside her husband, Ian, and her feline companion, Bob. So Shasta, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the Joyous Path to Millions.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Yeah, I love everything you're doing. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And it's so funny because we connected through just like an introduction from a mutual colleague friend. And your last name is my maiden name. And I feel like Townsend is not that common.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I was like, we're destined to know each other and connect. So welcome. I can't wait to hear all the things. Did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or did you have like a circuitous path to this journey?
Growing up, I grew up in poverty, and I am Canadian, and people never think of Canada as this place where there's like poverty and violence and racial violence. Cremate means that I'm mixed race. So I'm Indigenous and obviously white. And I grew up in an area of Canada where there was a lot of violence, a lot of racial violence. And I also grew up in poverty. And the reason that I share that is I didn't even know that a thing like entrepreneurship existed. Yeah. That was not even close to my paradigm as a kid. My parents were both service workers. My mom worked often as a hostess and a waitress, and my stepfather worked often as a short order cook. So I didn't grow up in an abundant mindset. I grew up in a family where money was very tight. There's times where we would go without food. That's how tight money was. And when I was growing up, my mom said to me, the only way out of poverty is through education. And so I did really well in school, and I ended up getting 2 degrees. And coming out of university here in Canada, I worked for Fortune 500 companies because in my mind, that was the way that you become wealthy. That was the way, at least you're not poor. The funny thing is that one of my bosses, and thank God for amazing bosses, right? I had lots of bad ones, but she said to me, and keep in mind, I'm in my like early 20s. She said, you have such an entrepreneurial mindset. You're such a go-getter. You could totally run your own business. And this to me was like, what are you talking about? I don't even have a clue what you mean by that or what that looks like. And I had a very great corporate career working for a great company in Canada, making tons of money. And then I had my late 20s, like that Mars return, as they say, at 29. I was super unhappy. I had really bad anxiety. Didn't know how to deal with stress. That wasn't something that I was taught to do. I was taught to be an overachiever, a go-getter. And I started having anxiety. And I turned 50 this year. So this is what are we talking, like almost 30 years ago. And so I started doing yoga. And this is answering your question to this journey. And I loved it. I didn't think that I would like it. I was like, oh, yoga's for wimps, but it made a huge shift in my life. And so I actually left my very high flying corporate career where I was doing almost six figures in my 20s. And I said, fuck it. Basically, I'm going to open a yoga studio. And literally everyone in my life, except for the man who is now my husband, who was my friend at the time, thought I was crazy. But I just knew in my heart that I wanted to do something more. And so that's how I started my entrepreneurial journey, is that it was quite accidental in some ways, and yet also that dark night of the soul that many of us have created business out of our own experiences of dark nights of the soul. And I created a very robust 7-figure yoga brand in Canada. And I did that for 20 years. So this is a very long answer to your question, but it's a circuitous journey to becoming an entrepreneur.
I love that. And one piece at a time. So you have a 7-figure yoga brand in Canada. You're doing that for 20 years. Are you building personal wealth at that time? Because I know sometimes the business can be making good money, but then a lot of it's going back out the door to overhead and rent and staff and that kind of thing.
Yeah. It didn't start off that way. And I should say that business closed during COVID. And it's why I'm actually such a big, passionate advocate for real estate, because I think every entrepreneur needs to have hard assets in their life, like a literal physical asset. So I started this yoga brand, and this is before yoga was what it is today. But I had a background, right, in corporate, and I had a background in marketing and communications. The business took off, and it actually got to the point where there was money. Like it was one of the first times in my life where there was like this abundance of money. Yes, I was making money in corporate, but I was investing largely into RRSPs and mutual funds in Canada, which is not my favorite way to invest. In fact, I cashed them all out later, but that was the kind of thing to do in corporate. So when the business started to make money, and my husband had his own business as well, he had a construction business, and neither one of us grew up with wealth. No one taught us this is what you should do with money. And I don't exactly know what the trigger was, but one day we just said to each other, we need to start investing in real estate. We need to have our money making money. I was raised with pay off debt, which I did at the time. I think there's good debt and bad debt. I don't have a problem with debt now. But we were like, how can we take the liquidity that we have? How can we take the credit that we have and even take our skills and start multiplying that? So we invested in basically a flip property, and we did really well. And so one of the interesting things in the start of this is that, again, this is 15 years ago, is that at the time there was a really established way of making money in real estate. And I didn't want to do it. I was like, no, I don't believe that I have to buy a property and hold it forever, or that I need all this money up front. And I'm a student of spirituality and quantum physics, and how do we actually apply universal laws and spiritual practices to the hardcore things like real estate? No one was doing this. Why aren't we doing this? And I've been a longtime student of Joe Dispenza. So I thought, how can we apply these things? And why I share this is that so many people think about real estate. They think, oh, I need $1 million to start with. I did not start with $1 million, like not even close. But what I did is I started with, what do we want our money to turn into? And I've always, and I'm not saying everyone can do this, but I'm always like, I want to turn $1 into $2. Meaning I want to turn 50,000 into 100,000 or 100,000 into 200,000. And I don't want to do it in 10 years. I want to do it within the year. And at the time, this was our goal, right? Real estate gurus were like, that's impossible. You're never going to do this. You're never, ever. That's not how it works. But we did. And we kept using these. And I'm not talking about manifestation. I'm talking about having a very clear goal and then using these universal laws and spiritual laws, and then actually selecting properties out of this very specific strategy. So anyways, we realized, oh shit, we're onto something here. And we kept doing this again and again. And we stayed true to the style of real estate investing that was right for us. Fast forward 15 years, COVID hits Canada, and my $1 million studio goes to, I don't know, $15,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I'm working my ass off. I'm working 5 times as hard, and I'm making like literally a fifth of the money.
Yeah.
And in Canada, we had a lockdown for almost 2.5 years. And it was fucking brutal, right?
Yeah.
Like, so no one's going to yoga. No one's going on international retreats. We're doing things all online. And so finally my husband said to me, and it was heartbreaking. It was very challenging for me to close that business. He said, you are literally working yourself to the bone. And how much longer can you sustain this? So I closed that business, and we had been talking about moving internationally out of Canada. There was lots of indicators from an investment perspective that it was a good time to get out of Canada. So fortunately, we sold all our real estate assets, which is again why I'm so adamant that at whatever level as an entrepreneur, you can start investing in real estate and invest strategically, which I'm happy to share how I do that with my clients and think about it myself. Yeah. It's a necessity. I really do think it's a necessity. I think there's something very deeply satisfying about having a tangible asset and the right tangible asset. And we know that real estate continues to be the number one way to build wealth or grow wealth in the world. So fortunately for me, I had these assets. It allowed me to leave Canada, move to Mexico, and now I support people in creating their amazing multiplying, I call it on-demand wealth as well.
That's incredible. And I would say not only is real estate one of the best money multiplying vehicles, but at least in the US, it's also the most tax advantaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think people work with me. I always say to them, it's just doing the math, right? Because sometimes it's funny because I remember one of the very first like money mindset things that I had to get over was like paying taxes, right? And paying the tax man, so to speak. And in Canada, we are very highly taxed. And it was like, okay, if you reach a new income threshold, you're going to be taxed higher. And I remember having to actually decide that was not a barrier for me, like that I'm happy to pay my share and then shift into the wealth mindset of tax strategies, right? Which growing up when you don't have any money,
right? There's nothing to shelter from taxes.
So now even with real estate that I do here in Mexico, we come up with tax strategies. The clients that I work with, we come up with tax strategies and it's interesting because I know people that are 7-figure entrepreneurs. And they will say things like, oh, I don't want to invest in real estate because I don't want the tax burden. And I say to them, you're not thinking about this accurately because we find the right property and the right strategy and put the tax strategy in place. And it's interesting because if I clear $100,000, but I've paid $20,000 in tax, I've still made $100,000. People have to really do the math and think about this, right? And people are like, oh my God, you paid $20,000 in tax. I say, but I still made $100,000.
Yeah.
I'm happy. And also there's social welfare aspects that I'm okay paying tax if it's going to the right places. So it's interesting. And you bring up and then truthfully, when you get really good at real estate, like you just said, you can actually use those assets to reduce taxes and overall tax burdens as well. So there's lots of creative and really cool things we could do with real estate.
Yeah. I'm a newer student to that game, but like when I started realizing like how tax advantaged it is, not disadvantaged. In the US, like, hello, the tax code is written by the wealthy for the wealthy. And so there's a lot of incredible ways. Think about a house is an appreciating asset. Meaning the value goes up over time. We know this, it's fact. Like when you look at the real estate market over time, yes, there have been minor blips, but the line goes up and to the right. It's growing. And yet it's one of the only appreciating assets that, at least in the US, you can take depreciation on, which is basically saying, oh, this part went down, so I should get a tax credit for this part that went down. So it's without going into all the details, which I think it sounds when I know, just think about that. That's a pretty incredible opportunity. And to me, it's like one of the most exciting reasons why you should be investing in real estate, because even if you don't feel like you have a ton of extra income, if you look at how much you are currently paying in taxes and you're able to reallocate some of that into an appreciating asset and then take the depreciation on that asset, so now you didn't have to pay that tax, it's pretty incredible. And that to me multiplies your wealth over time in a way that highly accelerates your net worth.
Absolutely. And not to mention that there's a lot of countries these days, Canada and the US, that have incentives, right? Depending on what strategy you're going into, you're building multi-unit residences or high density. Basically, Canada right now, they're paying people to do this, right? If I was still investing in Canada as a real estate developer or investor, that's what I would be in, because they're basically paying you to create wealth and to, of course, meet a social need. So I think a lot of times when people think again about real estate, they're like, oh, it's this one track, because that's what we've heard. We've heard it's commercial or it's buy and hold. And the truth is, it depends on your personality. It depends on the money that you have. It depends on your risk tolerance. And it depends on what do you want to create and how do you want to create it? Because the truth is, I stand firm that there is a real estate opportunity for anyone that wants to get involved in real estate. And truthfully, when you start looking around, you realize, holy crap, there's so much opportunity and there's actually so much benefit, right? Like the tax side of it, there's governmental incentives, there's all kinds of really interesting things that people can do. So take me back to the start of this, because you guys at one point didn't have any real estate investing experience, didn't grow up with parents that were investing in real estate, probably weren't super plugged into a network of people that were giving you all this information. And yet you had this strategy that you were willing to stick by and follow, even though it sounds like other people in real estate were saying like, good luck, that's probably not going to work. So how did that all come to you? How did you have the confidence in it to build your own evidence? Yeah, and I will say this, it took me about 10 years to realize consciously that I was doing something really extraordinary. And because I was like, this is just the way you do it. First off, I think that I'm a bit of a stubborn person. I'm a bit like, this shit's going to happen and you can't tell me that it's not going to. And I think that's a trait that you actually need as an entrepreneur. You need to be visionary and you need to be like almost unrealistic, like not delusional, but almost unrealistic. So one, I have that trait. It's a big trait inside myself. And so I started 15 years ago. Okay. So we had 100,000 and I said, how can we take 100,000 and turn it into 200,000? That's just, I was like, we have this money. Let's see what we can do. At the time, to answer your question, I was very deep and still in the truth that can create reality. That if I have a desire, that there is a way to fulfill it. Put it on a vision board and don't get off your ass and do anything. But I was like, we know, my husband and I both were students of metaphysics and quantum physics and universal laws. We said, we know how to create reality. We know that if we have a desire, we can make this happen. So I think, and why I share that is that mental attitude, that mental fortitude, which I know you teach as well, that clarity of desire, that clarity of no one is going to tell me what I can or can't do, I think actually is a very foundational thing. And often in real estate, no one ever talks about this. Like people will say to me, like, why are you talking about spirituality? Or why are you talking about quantum physics? And I say, because that's what this is. We're still creating reality. We're creating the craziest reality because it's brick and mortar things. How cool is that? So we had this in our brain. We had this knowingness that we were stubborn creators. So then from that, what I did is say, now, at the time, I'm getting this feedback of $100,000. First off, people were saying it's not enough. And I said, I want to turn 100,000 into 200 within a year. And the feedback was, you can't do that. That's not going to happen. It takes 10 years for assets to accumulate that way. And I thought, I know again that we can make portal jumps. We can make time leaps. So in many ways, I just put the blinders on. And I also almost went into, I'm going to show you energy, right? This shit's going down. Yeah. And what I did is, and this is some of the stuff that I do for my clients now, is I started to look. I had to then move my body through time. We still have to create our reality by taking action. And I said, I know that there's assets out there that are valued at 100. And literally, and this is where out of nowhere, we know it's not out of nowhere, but out of nowhere, there was an opportunity to buy basically a depressed house that was 115,000 Canadian. Yeah. And so we negotiated to 104. We bought it. We put some money into it. We did work ourselves and we sold it within a year for over 200,000, for $230,000 actually. Yeah. And once you've done this once, and I'm not saying that this is the right strategy for everybody, by like flips is what I mean. Don't get caught up in me talking about flips. That's my strategy. But once you start to see that you can create success, we all know this, then we have the inner unstoppable confidence. Yeah. We have the actual data to support this. And so we kept doing it again and again. But the first, just to go back to your question, is it was one getting very clear on what we wanted, like super clear, not wishy-washy clear. Like we're taking 100,000, we're going to turn into 200,000 in a year through real estate investing. And then having that mental fortitude of this is absolutely happening. And there's still a realism paradigm there, right? I didn't say I'm taking 100,000 and turning it into 100 million. Right. Like we still have to be in the container of the time-space reality to a certain degree. And then here's the other piece that we did. And for everybody listening, this is a really important piece. And the work that I do is very based on this specific piece. We asked ourselves, what's our personality? What is our personality? What skills do we have? What do we like doing? What do we have an aptitude for? What do we not have an aptitude for? And I had an aptitude, I still do. I have to do design. My husband has an aptitude for actual physical renovation. He has a background in construction. So there's a natural fit for us to do flips. It's very natural. I have all the skills, the personality. I like doing it. I'm willing to wait. Other clients that I have, that's not their personality. That's not their aptitude. They don't want to do those things. They may want to do pre-sales on a Airbnb or an international investment that just turns cash flow for them. Personality is a big part of real estate investing, whether you're a hands-on or hands-off investor, because it's going to dictate actually what you're going to be successful at. Now, why I know that's true is later I deviated from this. I deviated from this model. I went into an Airbnb model and a vacation property in a great area of Canada. We did well financially and I hated it. It was terrible for me. I felt burnt out. I was exhausted. I was dealing constantly, and I don't want to sound like I don't love people. I love people, but constantly kind of feeling dealing with guest services. It just wasn't what I wanted to do at the time. So it's again, if you're thinking about investing and you're listening to this, don't get caught up in what you hear all the gurus telling you is the way to be successful. Ask yourself, again, what do you really want? Like truly, what is your goal? And you have to get clear on that. And two, what's your personality? Yeah. And then from there, if you have those two data points, it's much easier then to say, which strategy road should I go down? What property, what market, what country, etc. Yeah. But those are two data points that almost nobody really talks about in the world of real estate investing, which to me were the key points, right? This is, you have to know these things. And I think that's why we've been so successful.
I love that. I know I talked to someone around here who's in real estate and he was like, it's like your appetite. It's just, what do you have a tummy for? And I was like, that's a good analogy, right? We all have different tastes and some stuff's going to sit well with us and some won't. So as you are building wealth and stepping into an identity that really is so different than your family of origin, did you bump up against any limiting beliefs around yourself? Were there money mindset moments where you had to coach yourself or seek out coaching to get you past a limiting belief or an issue that you were experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you're moving into a new threshold, your hairballs are going to come up, right? It's interesting because in the business side of it, I had for probably the first, I would say 8 years I was in business, I was stuck at an income level around 600,000. And I just couldn't get over it. And I knew I was at a set point. And yeah, I did work with a money mindset person and a business coach, which then pushed it over to $1 million. And we kept staying over $1 million. And it's funny because in that business, $1 million was this like gigantic number in my brain right at the time. And having a yoga studio and I think heart-centered businesses where you're starting to create wealth, like multiple six figures in the world of yoga at the time and spiritual-based businesses. That in that business, I really had to be like, this is spiritual. It's spiritual to be wealthy. It's spiritual to be successful. It doesn't mean I'm a fraud. It doesn't mean I'm greedy. It doesn't mean I'm in it for the money. But I am in it for the money. The money is just part of it. It's the natural flow of spirituality and source going through us all. So in that side of the business, I remember I was growing up in poverty and I was like, my dream was to have a Mercedes, right? It's just funny what kids. And so I went and bought this Mercedes. And I have to tell you, I felt ashamed driving it around. I was like, oh, people are going to think I'm this like bitch who only cares about the money. And those are things that I had to really work through and acknowledge and really disentangle myself from the spiritual community that says wealth is not spiritual. On the real estate side, what's really interesting, it's so interesting, right? That's family stuff that comes up. So as my husband, because you can hide wealth to a certain degree, right? Then you start doing big things like buying a Mercedes and it's not big now, but it seemed like it at the time, buying a Mercedes or buying properties. And both my husband and my family were like, what are you doing? You can't invest in real estate. You're going to go broke. Who do you think you are? You don't know what you're doing. And it was literally like we had to just completely disengage and actually set very firm boundaries. And what started to happen, and in the story that I actually talk about much publicly, but a massive amount of entitlement that came up out of both sides of our family. And it was very painful. I won't lie. It was very painful. Expectations that we should buy our relatives' houses, that we should pay off their credit cards, that we should take care of them in some way. And both my husband and I are first child, super responsible, the martyr archetype. And we did some deep work. And it was some of the most painful work. And at the time, I was working with a mentor and he said to me, there is a price to be paid. There is a price to be paid. And you cannot be in denial or delusion that there is not a price to be paid for the level of wealth and success and just simply life happiness that you want. And the price that you need to pay, Shasta, is you have to be willing to say, I am no longer going to be anybody's punching bag. I am no longer going to be the rescuer. I am no longer going to be the martyr. And you have to be okay. Some of those relationships dissolved and they haven't come back and they probably never will come back. The positive is we've replaced those relationships with amazing people, people that are truly love us and don't want anything from us. And I'm now at the point where I can see that part of my personal road was healing a whole family paradigm. Yeah. And I'm not the only one in my family that's done this type of work, but I think, and to me, that was important. I was like, I do want to change the ancestral line. I do want to change what's happened in my family. But the family piece was the most painful. Yeah. It was really painful for me at the time. And many clients and people that I've worked with, and I'm sure you can attest to the same, those family tentacles, whether it's conscious or unconscious, dang, they're strong. And there's something where I did seek out help with that. And I had my husband there and he was going through the same thing with his family. Now we're way past it. Yeah. If it's something that anyone listening is like, I feel my family's the ones that are holding me back. It can be. Yeah. And it took me a while and I've gotten now to the place where I don't want to say forgiveness because it makes it sound like they did something I need to forgive. And one level they did, but another where it doesn't matter. Yeah. Like we're all acting out stories and storylines and personal drama and whatever our soul's evolution is at the time. But the remorse and the guilt that I used to feel is gone. Yeah. It's just gone.
Thank you so much for sharing that because it does come up all the time. And when in my money wound methodology, that's usually specifically the evil money wound where it's wrong to be rich. But the root of that is there's a lot of fear of judgment. And the only reason that we're afraid of judgment is because we think that if we're judged, our belonging is on the line. And for unconscious mind, belonging still is a life or death situation. Because when we were babies, it was. If mom or dad didn't want you, they didn't have to kill you. They could literally just leave you somewhere and that's it. It's game over. And so even though we've now grown up and belonging is not a life or death situation, unconscious mind still perceives it the exact same way. And so then we have this entire physiological response to it that it feels like our survival is on the line. And so I'm so glad that you speak to it because it's a major fear and concern that comes up for people. I know it's come up for me. And it's like part of the reason that we want to be wealthy is because we want to be generous. And at the same time, no one wants to be treated like a bank or to feel like, oh my gosh, if people know that I have money, all of a sudden they're going to come for it. And so it really is can be a tangled up kind of a thing. And I just really appreciate you speaking to it because it's what's the alternative? Is the alternative that you didn't become a millionaire, that you didn't set yourself free financially, and you didn't have the means to help yourself or other people, or that you're in relationships with people that are completely contingent on you doing things that you don't want to do? Then you're financially free, but you're not free because you're not sovereign. And so it's like when you examine all the possible outcomes, it's wait a second. Even as painful as this is to set a boundary or say no to someone that I care about, it's in the pursuit of freedom and in what feels right. And it never feels right to us to do something that sacrifices our sovereignty.
Exactly. And I think it's interesting because if we go back to this idea of, let's call it personal emancipation or freedom or sovereignty, right? And we think about all of us on this planet here, I truly believe this, we're here to discover the truth of who we are, right? The truth being the big T truth. And the journey around money is quintessential to that because for thousands and thousands of years, we've been tied up into survival paradigms. And then you add on culture, race, gender, all of the other things on top of that. And I find it so interesting that we have the split still between spirituality and wealth. And yet both is about a path of, again, freedom, emancipation, sovereignty, power, really understanding who you are and what you can do and what you can create. And you're reminding me that, again, when you asked me the question about like, how did you know how to get started, so to speak? And it was like, I really had a thirst to experience who I was, to see how we could do things and how we could do things as elegantly and quickly as possible. So I'm appreciating your words. And we all want wealth for the hedonistic things to a certain degree that creates, but ultimately it is about personal freedom and power, right? And so what I say to people, when you can go to any country in the world and understand how to make money and grow money in real estate, you are unfucking stoppable. It doesn't matter what your government is doing. It doesn't matter if there's a global plague, you will be successful. And there is something really powerful, obviously, about feeling that way.
Amen. So you help a lot of people invest now in Mexico, in real estate that's in Mexico. And I just want to touch on this briefly because I've been actively looking at out-of-state real estate investments. And I notice my own limiting beliefs. And even though I keep poking holes in them, there is a part of me that's, this would be so much easier if it was like in my backyard. But the truth is, the style of real estate investing that's available in Southern California is so wildly different than what's available in other states or in other countries. And so on the one hand, there's tons of advantages of doing long distance real estate investing. But I'm sure that what stops a lot of people is this feeling of, but it's so far away and I won't have any control. And how do I make sure that things go properly? And so what do you say to that person?
Yeah. And I think that's natural. And those are good questions to be asking. The question to ask yourself before you even consider international real estate, whether it's Mexico's booming, to me, it's like a no-brainer. But I also live here and I see what's happening and I help people do this every single day. Again, I always say the same thing. What do you want? What do you want? Do you have a taste for international? If you have a taste for international, pay attention because it's not by accident. And there are opportunities in other markets that are probably not present. Or I would say it this way, we can meet your goals sooner or more elegantly, right? There's opportunities here in Mexico that people can turn wealth quicker. It's just the truth. And so you have to say, what do I really want? And do I have a taste for that? Then it becomes a matter of whether you work with a real estate strategist like myself, or you just go straight to an agent. You just have to be really careful that you know how to advocate for yourself. And it's really then a matter of understanding what you want, the opportunity that's there, and then really the steps to get there. So the truth is, we know that, let's say you bought a property in Mexico and the fear is, how would I manage it, etc. There's tons of resources in place. And it's really then about not so much about finding the resources. It's more about discerning who's the right resource. How do you have things work? And this is part of what I do with people so they don't have to ask these questions and do all this themselves. Yeah. But the abundance of support around real estate. There's a person that will help you do something. And I'll be frank. When I moved to Mexico 3 years ago, I spoke a little bit of Spanish. I didn't know the market here. And I am astounded by the amount of people that I've met, the support that I have in my life. I actively seek it out. I know how to utilize it. I know how to be a support. We really live in a global world. There's so many experts out there, let me say it that way, that want to help you. And if the block then becomes, I don't want to pay a property manager 20% because that's the standard rate here in Mexico. Again, it's like paying taxes, right? So if you could make $5,000 a month, but you're paying someone $1,000, that's no brainer. That's easy math to me. Of course you should be doing that. So it's also examining those unconscious blocks and beliefs. But I would just say, if you, again, understand what your goals are, understand if you have a taste for things, and then it becomes the easy things of ticking off the boxes of what do you need to know and who's the right resource to work with, right? And finding those resources in place. And I'll also say that there's so much security checks in place now these days. Like, people often say to me, oh my God, Mexico, they're fear mongering and things. And I say, I feel safer in this country than I do in the US or Canada. And also there are checks in place, so to speak. Do people get ripped off globally? Of course they do. But there's ways, again, of ensuring that you have the right resources, you have the right person, so much online management software. It's just, and the other thing that I want to say, there's the last thing, and then I'll stop talking about this, is international real estate doesn't have to be an Airbnb. There is all kinds of innovative things going on. I think people tend to think, well, if I'm going to buy in a place like Mexico, I'd buy a condo and I'd rent it out on Airbnb. It's great because Mexico has no Airbnb restrictions. But again, we don't know if that's the right strategy for you. There could be another international investing strategy that is completely suited to, again, your goals and your personality, and all those other things that feel like a block don't even have to exist.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think this conversation has opened up possibility for a lot of people. And to me, the energetics of possibility are so delicious. Mm-hmm. It's like everything starts that way.
Totally.
And so it's, if you've never considered international real estate investing, maybe now you are. If you've never considered the idea that you could double your money in a year, maybe now that's a possibility for you. And when mind sees something as possible, it's like, without us even putting a ton of conscious attention on it, I find that ideas will drop in and will attract resources to ourselves, because it's like the subconscious part of our mind, the program that's running in the background, it's constantly trying to figure stuff out. And so just by implanting possibility and causing people to feel that something's available to them that they didn't otherwise, then their mind will naturally start looking for ways to bring it about. So thank you for causing possibility in this conversation. For anyone who wants to reach out and connect with you directly, what's the best way to do that?
So there's two ways. Probably that I have a website called propertyrichempire.com. And I talk about how to do real estate investing that's more personality based and based on assets that you have. And the other is my Instagram channel, which is Shasta.Townsend. The cool thing about that channel in particular is I'm actually currently building houses here in Mexico. I talk about investing all over the world. You can see the lifestyle and different things that are happening.
It's amazing.
propertyrichempire.com or Shasta.Townsend on Instagram.
Okay, perfect. And then last question, since our podcast is called The Joyous Path to Millions, what has it felt like for you to be on your own joyous path to millions?
Can I say orgasmic? Because
Yes.
I think that's the word, right? I think that especially when growing up in poverty, not realizing the possibilities, that's one of my favorite words also, the adventure and the freedom and the things that I've created in my life that I couldn't even have imagined, like unimaginably orgasmic.
What a delicious adjective. Shasta, thank you so much for coming on the show. And to everyone listening, thank you so much for tuning in. My body is just buzzing with the energy, the frequency of possibility right now. I hope yours is too. It reminds me, I distinctly remember it. We were doing a softball pool party, but the reason is we were braiding fake neon green hair into the girls' hair because that was their color for their all-stars team. And we had a tournament the next few days and we wanted the girls to feel special and have all this matching hair braids and everything. And one of the other moms was helping me braid hair, and she was going to have to leave to show a house to one of her clients. She's a real estate agent. And she was like, yeah, this client of mine, I just sold her a house a few months ago, but she just got, I can't remember now if it was $1 million or $5 million, but she got basically a 7-figure bonus at work. And so she wants to buy more real estate. And I was like, wait, what? She got a 7-figure bonus? What does she do? And she's a partner at a law firm. And I felt this same feeling, just this zinginess of possibility. Like, I love knowing that's possible. That's happened for someone, that they got a 7-figure bonus at work. Not because I want to be a lawyer, but just because I think that's so cool to know that's even available, that's in the realm of possibilities. I just feel like Shasta opened up so much of that. Make sure you give her a follow on Instagram at shasta.townsend. Screenshot this episode. Tag us both. Let us know what your top takeaways were. Here are mine. Number 1, with real estate investing, asking yourself the question of what's my personality and what are my skills and how can I apply that in this area? Number 2, we're here to learn who we truly are. I love that she said that it's really just a journey home. And I think there's a quote, like we're all just walking each other home. Maybe Ram Dass said that, but we're walking ourselves home. Like we're getting to experience who we truly are, but doing it in this fun little playground of life. Number 3, how can we apply quantum law to industries like real estate? I thought that was such a fun thought exercise and such a beautiful question to ask ourselves. If we're wanting to invest or we're wanting to move into a different industry and we have some preconceived notion about that, how do we bring in law of attraction? How do we bring in quantum physics? How do we bring energetics into it? Number 4, sovereignty above all else, and taking a stand in the name of sovereignty. Really appreciated that Shasta was willing to share just some of the challenges that have come with building wealth, because listen, I know you can relate to that. I can relate to it. I've coached hundreds of students, maybe even we're close to 1,000 at this point. It comes up regularly. These are things we are concerned about. And here's a woman who faced them. She's not sugarcoating it. It was very painful. And yet there she is standing in her sovereignty and helping other people become free as well. And then takeaway number 5, the energetics of possibility. Continue to opt into conversations like this. Put yourself around people where at the end of it, you feel like, wow, so much more is possible for me now. I have so many ideas that I didn't have before. I'm seeing opportunities everywhere that I couldn't see before. Those are the spaces in the rooms that you want to be in. Those are the conversations that you want to opt into. And one of the places that I cause possibility, I cause that feeling, is in Soul Mission. That's my private podcast. So we will drop the link to that in the show notes. If you want live transmissions, off the cuff, real time, as I'm thinking, feeling, and experiencing things and running my businesses and living a life that's in alignment with my soul mission, I take the best of it, the juiciest parts, and share them as transmissions with the purpose of causing you to feel possibility and causing you to feel more aligned, more alive, and more lit up about your own soul mission. So I would love to have you join that, and you get free trial so you can listen and make sure it's your vibe before you start the subscription. So as always, thank you for tuning in. I've got great interviews and episodes coming up, so be sure to listen, subscribe, and share, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. Changing the way that we think, feel, and talk about money is up-leveling the planet. I truly believe that. The ripple effect starts with you tuning in, and it spreads when you share this show on Instagram and Facebook. You can tag me at mmakesmoney. And you know what moves the needle the most? Taking just a minute to leave a 5-star review on iTunes. This show isn't free to produce, so let's multiply those dollars invested and help this show reach a bigger audience each week. So thank you in advance for your help. I really appreciate it. And until next time, I'm sending you all the magic money vibes on your joyous path to millions.